And then methought earth faded, I rose as borne on wings, beyond the waste of ruined lives, the press of human.
Hey, welcome to another segment of Hardcore Sports. Special thanks to Kenny Graham for helping us get on the air today. Thanks to Eileen Hanlon. Go Eli. Go Eli. That's my new Eli chant for all you Giant fans. And Eileen Hanlon. Go Eli. But yeah, we'll continue on. We've got Dan the Man on the line. What's going on, Dan?
Hey, what's up?
Dan the Man, 50 grand. Dan has been my homeboy, it seemed like forever. But Dan and I have been very close friends for, I guess, very close to 30 years. Very close to 30 years. So yeah, Dan and I, Dan the Man, and Dan, I would just want to say Dan has helped me out through thin and thin. A lot of times I was down and out, and I didn't have a job, and Dan said, "I'm gonna hook you up with a job, my brother." So I really appreciate Dan helping me out, because there's a couple of times in my life where I wasn't really doing well, and there's not many people that you can trust in trying to help you out. And Dan said, "You know what? I know a few people. Let me make a few calls." And I'm serious. Dan hooked me up with a job, on NBC. I was working behind the scenes on NBC. I'm talking about I was rubbing elbows with Katie Couric. And this was before Katie Couric even became an anchor. She was filling in for Deborah Norville. And this was, I don't even want to say what year it was, but because I don't want to age myself. But yeah, if you can figure it out, Katie Couric was actually filling in for, I think, Deborah Norville at the time, and Brian Gumbel. And I was shocked. But Dan hooked me up with that job. So I appreciate Dan. Dan is a good friend and looked out for the brother when he was down and out. But moving right along, got a lot of stuff going on. The Knicks have hit a bad streak right now. They're ailing. We have Melo with his deal with the honey nut Cheerio nonsense. It's nonsense. Melo, come on. You my peoples and all that. You my boy and all that. But please, come on. Don't get upset over some honey nut Cheerios. Come on, let's not lose it. Let's not turn this 2012, 2013 Knicks into the 95, whatever year that was, 96, 97 Knicks, when half the team came off the bench. And then that was a team that could have won it all. But half the team left the bench in that Miami series, and we know what happened with that. Actually, the Knicks were leading the Miami Heat 3-1. When a fight broke out, half the team came off the bench, and half the team got suspended, and the Miami Heat ended up winning that series after being down 3-1. So, Carmelo, we know you know this. Also, Melo, you know this. You were suspended, and J.R. Smith were suspended as Denver Nuggets. I believe Melo was suspended 15 games back in the days for fighting Nate Robinson, and I forget who else was involved in that.
Well, he sucker punched Marty Collins.
Who was that, J.R. or Melo?
Melo did that. He sucker punched Marty Collins and then ran.
So, yeah. We have to go back and look at the video, but yeah, Melo and JR were suspended. 15 games for Melo. I remember 10 games for JR, 15 games for Melo. And let's come on. you're a veteran, seasoned veteran. I'll say it like this, Mello. Just act like every day you're on. This Knicks team, just act like you're playing on the Olympics and everything will be all right. Act as if this Knicks team is the Olympic team. And so just act as if some Russian athlete is saying something, and if it's Garnett, just act like he's Russian. He's saying something you don't understand. He's speaking another language. Or you just look at him. He says something about honey nut Cheerios or la. You just look at him like, I don't understand Russian. I don't understand that language. That's what you got to do. Because if they could get under your skin with honey nut Cheerios, they're going to get under your skin with something else. So just act as if the Knicks are the Olympic team that you were on, and somebody talking nonsense to you is speaking another language, and you're going to be all right. You'll be all right. If Walt Frazier could go his whole career without having a fight or getting a technical, I think that you guys can do it too. Moving right along. So we've got the Knicks. We have Melo being suspended. We've got Raymond Felton, who I believe is the key to the Knicks' success. Raymond Felton, who has been out with the broken hand or broken pinky, I think, broken finger. We've got the Brooklyn Nets, and we're going to get a report from Dan about the Brooklyn Nets and everything. The Brooklyn Nets have been surging, and we're going to get a report from Dan about the Brooklyn Nets and their success. And P.J. Carlissimo. But first, this week was an upsetting week for me for a number of reasons, but in particularly Major League Baseball. I am heated at Major League Baseball and the Major League Baseball Hall of Fame. They had no inductees this year. And they could have brought this whole thing to some closure this week. The Major League Baseball had an opportunity this week to bring this whole steroid argument and this whole HGH argument to some closure this week, and they chose not to. And then what happens is we have this whole discussion all over again about steroids and human growth hormone and who cheated and who didn't cheat. The whole thing is a kangaroo court. It is a kangaroo court. And it's unfortunate. And I want to start the discussion like this. In 1956, and listen, you won't hear this. This is why we call this hardcore sports. We call this show hardcore sports because this is for hardcore fans. This is for people who really want to know something. We're not just running our mouths here. We're getting into in-depth stuff on this show. It's hardcore, man. Hardcore sports. In 1956, the Olympic Committee banned steroids and started testing for steroids in 1956. So that means steroids have been around for almost 70 years. At least 60 years. And Major League Baseball acts as if, and these people on these radio programs act as if steroids just came into being in the 1980s or 1990s. I've heard a player, I forget the player's name, but he was old school. He was an old school pitcher. I think his name was Denny McLain. Does that ring a bell, Dan?
Yeah.
Denny McLain. I think he played for the Orioles, a pitcher, right?
Nah, he pitched for the Tigers. He won 31 games in, I believe, 1968 I believe.
Yeah, I heard an interview with him. And he said steroids were around in his era in the 60s and 70s, and he has no reason to lie. And Jose Canseco is the one with his book opened up this whole Pandora's box about steroids in baseball, and he said 70% or more in his book. And I don't think he has a reason to lie. He said 70% of the players were using steroids. So that means if I don't understand how someone can say that Barry Bonds is a cheater if you've got pitchers who are on steroids pitching and throwing at him at 100 miles an hour, who are on steroids. If he's been taking steroids, and there are pitchers, and I'm saying even before, let's get into the head of Barry Bonds. Let's just get into the head of Barry Bonds, and let's say McGuire for just a sec. If you got guys, pitchers who you know, who are on steroids, I'm gonna say, and first of all, and then second of all, there were no rules. There was no testing until like the late 90s, early 2000s. I think 2001 is when they started testing for steroids, if I'm not mistaken. And I don't know how so get yourself in the mind of Barry Bonds. You got pitchers throwing at him 100 miles an hour, and he knows they're on steroids. Listen, I'm going to get some steroids too, man. I'm going to get me some steroids because all these pitchers throwing at me, you got these no-name pitchers who coming up here throwing at me at 100 miles an hour who are on steroids. So who is the cheater here? And the thing about it is they've got Roger Clemons, and there hasn't been any kind of real evidence except hearsay on the two of them. It's nothing but hearsay. Barry Bonds has never failed a drug test, and neither has Roger Clemons failed a drug test. And it's all basically hearsay. And Dan, what is your take on this whole thing?
Well, from old timers that told me about baseball, they said steroids been in existence before 1956. They said it's been in sports for a while, and nobody got caught. I'll give you a good example. I want people to look up this baseball player. His name is Ted Kluszewski. He played for the Cincinnati Reds in the National League back in the 1950s. They believe that this guy actually was on steroids when he played for the Cincinnati Reds in the 50s. He had 3 years in a row. He had 40 or more homers. But what was kind of unusual, his arms were so big that he wore a sleeveless jersey because his biceps were so big. And many believe that he was on steroids because they said that he went from hitting 13 homers or something like that to hitting like 49 homers and 47 home runs. And then you see how big his arms were. I've talked to a lot of guys that actually saw baseball back then. They said they believe he was on steroids for sure. And then I spoke to, because I work in a law firm, and I spoke to older attorneys. They said, yeah, this stuff's been going on a long time. It's just that, people never thought they would get caught doing this type of stuff. So, if you look at Major League Baseball after the strike in '94, a lot of fans said they wouldn't watch another baseball game again or go to another baseball game until Mark McGwire and Sammy Sosa was battling for the home run title, and they were, doing it. I think McGwire hit 72, and Sammy Sosa had about 60 something, 66 home runs.
Yeah.
Everybody got back into baseball. They said, "Wow, these guys is really clubbing." Nobody thought that these guys were juiced up. They thought the balls were juiced up.
Yeah, they said the balls were juiced up. I remember.
Yeah. So basically, I blame all of this not on the players. I blame this on Major League Baseball, the people that were head of Major League Baseball, because they were losing a lot of revenue because the fans weren't showing up. So basically, it's not on the players. It's on Major League Baseball, the people that are executives that's running it. And then number two, why should a flimsy sports writer who don't even play sports, don't even play the game of baseball, probably never even played baseball before, gonna determine who goes to the Hall of Fame? It's a shame, because you know what I'm looking at now? By not having all these guys go to the Hall of Fame, next year you have, I think, Greg Maddux and some more baseball players. It's going to be, a lot of these players are going to have a hard time getting to the Hall of Fame in future years. You might have another year where nobody goes into the Hall of Fame because they're keeping all these players, for some reason, out the Hall of Fame. So it's like a domino effect now. Nobody's going to go in there. So you might have a whole generation of baseball players that won't even go to the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, it's very sad. And Dan, you bring up a good point, which I was about to bring up also, is in 1994, no one was watching any baseball. After that strike, people said they had it with baseball because they stopped that. They stopped the season. For those young folks, that was almost 20 years ago. They stopped the season. They started that strike, and they didn't come to an agreement until the following season. So Pedro Martinez was on his way to having a career year and going to a World Series for the Montreal Expos. And what happened was, in the middle of that year, they put a halt to all of that. They stopped it in the middle of the season. And everybody was upset. They said, well, I'm not watching any more baseball. And then here you go, Barry Bonds, the next year, all of a sudden, Barry Bonds, Mark McGwire, Sammy Sosa started with their home run. Pow, pow, pow.
Barry Bonds, he started later, because I read an article where Barry Bonds wanted to know what, because he was upset with Sammy Sosa. He says, I've been hitting home runs throughout my career. How did this guy started hitting home runs like that? Bonds didn't start.
Until the year after, yeah. It was virtually, it was exactly like you said. It was Sosa and McGwire first. And then Bonds said, let me get into this. Let me get some juice. But we don't know that for sure. But I will say this, and Dan knows this as well. The home run numbers have come way down. The home run numbers have come way down. I don't think we've had a 50, maybe one guy has hit over, since they started testing, I think we've only had one guy that's hit over 50. Since and maybe Dan could correct me on this, since A-Rod hit 54 in 2007, I don't think there's anybody, maybe one guy that's hit over 50. But the home run, we haven't seen any 60 home runs since, or 70 home runs in a season since the McGwire Bonds Sosa sweepstakes. But the home runs, just to say, that juicing stuff does do something. But also, what's lost in all of this is we're looking at the hitters are looked at. The pitchers kind of get a pass, even though some pitchers have been caught. But you have to be caught. You can't just look at the numbers with pitchers, Because a pitcher could be throwing hard, but they could be throwing wild. The roids help Clemons because he can throw in the strike zone. But if you got a pitcher who's throwing hard but not hitting the strike zone, it doesn't help the guy. He could be throwing 100 miles an hour, but the steroids don't help him, or the HGH doesn't help him. But yeah, it's a sad day. It's a real sad day, and we could talk all day about it. But I've been upset this week with Major League Baseball and the Hall of Fame. It's all nonsense. It's all a kangaroo court. 70% of the people we're using. And we didn't even touch on everything that we need to touch on as far as steroids and HGH and all that. But 70%. That means pitchers included. So who's cheating? Who's cheating? You can't say Barry Bonds was a cheater. And on top of it, you don't even know that he cheated because he never said he took HGH and all this stuff. There was no testing. And remember, also I want to say this before we move on. They can talk about cheating and all this. This stuff was not regulated until later on. Into the last years of McGwire's career, the last years of Bonds' career is when they started the testing. In the mid 2000s is when they started the testing. When Barry Bonds and McGwire and all these guys were putting up all these numbers, and others were putting up all these numbers, it was legal in baseball. It was legal for those guys. It wasn't prohibited. So, and I think that the people from Major League Baseball and the Writers Association, and Dan brings up a good point, these guys have never touched the field in their life. And I believe there's a lot of haterade. Because they making, what, $40,000 or whatever they make as a writer, or $50,000, and these guys make millions of dollars, and they want to hammer them over the head with this Hall of Fame stuff. I mean, I've lost respect for them as it is with the Pete Rose situation. And I'm to say this, and I'm going to end it on this. I think we got to get another organization together, which would include writers, broadcasters, players, and fans to make a decision on who gets in and who doesn't. If you guys are going to take such a hardline stance, this holier-than-thou stance, it may be time to open up a second Cooperstown and started by a new committee. If you're going to take that kind of a stance, it may be time to start another Cooperstown somewhere else.
Yeah, you know what, Mike, let me interject a little bit. Say a guy like Mike Piazza, who's the greatest hitting catcher of all time. You know, there's no proof that he even did any type of juicing or anything. You know, he said he's coming out with a book saying that he was clean all them years. He might not get in the Hall of Fame for many years because of the writers not voting certain people in, you know, which we know that he should have made, you know, he should make the Hall of Fame easy, but because you're not letting, you know, a lot of guys in because you think they on steroids, it's going to hurt a guy like Mike Piazza.
Yeah, no doubt. Mike Piazza is a much different case, and he's a bigger tragedy than the others because he's never tested positive for steroids. And he is not getting in based on a suspicion. You suspect this guy to have taken, this is the biggest disgrace. Mike Piazza doesn't get in because you suspect we need another year to look at this? Are you serious? Yeah, some guy came on the radio from one of the newspapers, and he was talking this hardcore stance. We need another year to look at this? Piazza went out there and played the games, folks. Mike Piazza went out there, and it's the biggest, and because there's no proof whatsoever. And then on top of it, another thing also, the FBI has a list, They only released one name. There's a list of 100, maybe 150 names of players who tested positive that the FBI did an investigation based on the Congress had investigated this situation, and they did their own testing, and the FBI has a list. They only release A-Rod's name, and there are 100 to 150 names on that list. That's something else. And then you see some of the names, if you've seen some of the names that have been on some of these lists of guys there have been some superstars, but most of the players are players you never heard of or marginal players. So my thing is this. If you're a superstar, the bottom line also, and we spent the whole day, we didn't get a chance to, we've got 3 minutes left, and I guess we're just going to stay on this. My thing is this. If there's some kind of secret potion in HGH or steroids that makes you a superstar, so how come it didn't make those other guys superstars? Most of the players, if you go back and look at the lists, go back, Google them, they have lists of players who've been caught to have taken performance-enhancing drugs. Most of them aren't even superstars. A lot of them get caught in the minor leagues and you never even hear of them. And there's no secret potion in this stuff to make you a superstar. And my thing is if you're a superstar like Barry Bonds or Roger Clemens or Mike Piazza, you're going to stand out no matter what. If you stink, you're going to stink. And if you look at the list, there are a lot of marginal players who have been caught. Look, let's take a look. Andy Pettitte, he's no superstar. I mean, he's done a lot to help the Yankees. He's a above average pitcher. He's done very well. He's admitted he was on a list. He admitted to taking HGH and steroids or what have you. But he's no superstar. So steroids didn't help him to be anything super. So why punish Bonds and Clemens? So it's really crazy. This whole steroid thing, this whole thing with performance enhancing drugs is a kangaroo court in Major League Baseball. The best thing to do it is look at it the way I look at it. 70% of the players are doing it. You can't find a cheater. If the pitcher is it's total common sense to me. If you've got a pitcher or pitchers and you're pitching against a batter, if the pitcher is on something and the batter is on something, it's a wash. And if 70% of the guys have done it, and listen, you're not going to catch everybody. If you're only testing 50 guys randomly or 100 guys and there are 1,000 players in the sport, you're not testing everybody. And obviously, the superstars are going to be have more of a microscope on them or a magnifying glass than somebody who's like the 25th man on a team. Nobody cares about the pinch hitter that comes up, who's like the last man on the bench. They don't care if he took steroids or not. The superstars are the ones who are getting blamed. And whereas 70% of the sport was doing it, and nobody cares about the marginal players. We've run out of time. We've got 10 seconds left. We're taking next weekend off because it's MLK weekend. It's also Obama weekend, Obama inauguration weekend. We'll see you in...
Thank you. Thank you, Eddie, and welcome. This evening, what we want to do is to give you an idea of the reality of what we have, what we could have lost, and what we didn't lose because of the unity of the people and the understanding and the people that realized that something had to be done in the state and the city of New York. So instead of giving you bad news, we'll give you a lot of good news tonight. A lot of good news.